Good morning. Today is Sunday, August 10th, 2025. Last Thursday night, Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government made a momentous decision to occupy first part of Gaza, Gaza City, and then their plan is to occupy the rest of Gaza. Many people have strong feelings on both sides, and I want to share an analysis of this decision from Micah Goodman. And he explained this on Friday to Daniel Gordis. Now, Micah Goodman is perhaps one of the most widely admired writers and public intellectuals in Israel. His opinions are respected by people on all sides, and he has a way of expressing things that is, on the one hand, so comprehensive, but also so straight to the point and clear. And he shares an overview of this decision that is so insightful and it's so compelling. I think that it puts everything into perspective in a way that I think we all need to hear. I think this is really important for us to understand. So this is Micah Goodman. And he starts, I think Israel is always misunderstood because we're always faced with tragic dilemmas. That's the story of this war. The nature of a tragic dilemma is you have to choose between few options, and they're all bad options. Which means you know you're going to choose a bad option. And the only reason you're going to do something bad is because in your calculation, it's less bad than the alternative. The problem with that is that there is this illusion in the Western world that the world is binary. There's a dilemma between good and bad. So you have to have the courage to choose the good and not to choose the bad. But what if there are only bad choices? And that's the problem that Israel faces in the West, because we're being judged as if there's a good option, and we're not choosing it. And that's why, in the West, we are radically misunderstood. Because obviously Hamas designed a tragedy by building not an army that protects civilians, but an army that is protected by civilians. So, the dilemma facing Israel in this war is either we dismantle Hamas, which means to cut through the civilians, which is very bad, or Hamas gets to October 7th us again. And that's also very bad. And so between these two bad options, we're choosing bad over bad, but we're being judged as if we're choosing bad over good. And that's how we're being misunderstood all over the world. So, Micah Goodman says, I want to explain the inner logic of this decision to occupy Gaza, why someone would think it makes sense is he wants to present the best argument for it. I'm not talking about politics where we're insulting people and looking at people's worst motives, and that's not what I'm discussing. That's not what Micah Goodman is discussing. Let's make the best case for why this approach is bad, but it's less bad than the option. Because there's so many Jews in the world looking at Israel and they're saying, can't you see you're destroying your reputation in the West? Can't you see that the world is turning its back on you? Which it is. And here's the thing. Israelis listen to that. And it's hard for them to listen to that because Israel cares what the world thinks. And I hear people say, what does it matter? Israel should do what they have to do and forget about everybody else. But that's just not the reality. That's not the reality for Israel, and that's not the reality for Israel. Israel cannot go it alone, politically, militarily, etc. It just can't. So Israelis care about what the rest of the world says. The thing is, Israelis care about something else also. They care about their reputation in the West, and they realize it's in terrible shape. But they also care about their reputation in the Arab world, in the East. Because Israel always has two reputations it wants to protect. And there are two emotions that Israel wants directed at us. Towards the East, towards the Arab world, Israel wants them to be afraid of us. We want them to be scared. We want fear. Because that's the only way we can stop them from attacking us, is if they fear us. But in the West, we want love. We want to be loved. We want to be appreciated. We want to be supported. And here's the problem. Everything we do to create fear in the extremist Arab world erodes the love in the West. And everything that we do not do to protect the love in the West will destroy our ability to deter our enemies. They won't be afraid. And if you're Israeli, that's what helps you sleep better at night. You have to choose between the fear of your enemies or the love of your friends. We choose fear. This is the war. So that's the reputation we care about. Our reputation among the extremists in the Arab world, where we want to be seen as a little crazy, as forceful, as unpredictable. Don't try it. Now, if you agree with this assumption that the reputation of Israel towards the extreme Arab world in the East is more important than the reputation of being loved and supported by the West, again, it's a tragedy. It's a dilemma. We would love to have both. But you can't have both. So you have to choose what is the least bad of giving up one of those. And so given that, this government is saying that if the war ends now with Hamas standing, Israel will lose its ability to deter its enemies. And the narrative in the Middle East among Arab extremists will be Hamas won. And the thinking, and this is, according to Goodman, certainly the thinking in the majority of Palestinians and many others in that world, if the war ends, even if Hamas has had all of its 24 battalions destroyed, and all of their missiles are destroyed, and their leadership is killed, the fact that they survived means that they won. Because they're participating in a long journey to victory. And that's really the question. How do you measure victory? So, Israel is measuring victory by now. Hamas is measuring victory by the long journey. And as a result of this difference, for Israel to win, we need Hamas destroyed now. But for Hamas to win, they need not be destroyed. They just have to survive. And so the narrative of this government is, and again, he's trying to build the best argument for this government, is that if we end the war now, Hamas wins. The narrative will be that it won, and the larger narrative is that Israel is a weak country. The smallest militia in the Middle East attacked Israel, and it survived. And then after we destroyed our reputation in the West, everybody hates us. We didn't even get rewarded with a strong reputation against the Arabs who hate us in order to deter our enemies. So therefore, we must destroy Hamas now. That's the best argument for the thinking of the government to go into Gaza now. So now, Micah Goodman disagrees with that. But listen to his explanation of why he disagrees with it, because it's very, very important. Not because the alternative is good. The alternative is bad. But he says, it's just less bad. And he explains why. Going into Gaza now, going into Gaza City first, and then the Prime Minister has said, then the rest of Gaza, that means that, number one, we're going against the world. So we're going to lose even more the support of the Western world. Two, the government will be going against the clear wishes of a clear majority of Israeli society. And that point is key. Listen to this. This is brilliant. Israel does not know how to win wars that the people are not united behind. Now, he goes through a history. For time, I'm just going to shorten this by saying you can look back at every war Israel has fought. And when the people were united, they won. And when the people were divided, they lost. He gives the examples. Israeli history has an interesting lesson that we don't know how to win wars when we're not united. Okay, that's number two. And number three. The army is very tired. It's not possible to exaggerate how tired they are. And it's not only the people and being away from their homes and the wives and the families and the effect on their businesses. It's not only that. It's also the machinery, the vehicles. A higher level of vehicle malfunctions is going on right now. And when there's a high level of fatigue, you make more mistakes. And more mistakes, you're less alert. And more vehicles break down. And then there's always the fear, and this has been covered extensively by Israeli news, that the longer this goes on, the more people in Miluim, in the reserves, will stop coming, will simply refuse to serve. And sadly, that number is growing because for many of them, an increasing number of them, it's just too much. And then our ability to deter our enemies is lessened. And it makes it look like our army is crumbling, God forbid. So you have all these things going against the world, against the people, against the army, meaning with the weakness of the army. And those, he says, those are reasons to say, listen, this plan of going into Gaza, it could be a catastrophe. And then there's one more issue, and that's the issue of the hostages. Okay, so let's just logically for a moment understand that there is a logic that says that in order to defeat Hamas and to build a narrative of victory, you're risking your hostages. Okay. Goodman is against that morally, but that's a logic, and we hear that certainly from certain Israeli politicians. But here's the problem with that. The problem is such a decision would need to be agreed to by a massive majority of Israelis. You cannot make such a dramatic decision when you are representing far less than half the country. And there's a strategic reason for that, not just moral, a strategic reason. Because if Israel were to do this, to risk the hostages in order to defeat Hamas, that will change who we are for a long, long time. And if you want to change who we Israelis are for a long time, the people of Israel need to want that. The reason you cannot do such a thing without a very strong majority is, what happens if it goes wrong? Now, if it's a decision that's made by the nation as a collective with a consensus, we could survive it going wrong. But if we make this decision where the majority is totally against it, as clearly it is, then that could really lead to catastrophe in its aftermath if it goes wrong. So it's a tragic dilemma. And we have to choose between bad and bad and decide what is the least bad. And Goodman's argument is that the least bad is not to risk our brothers and sisters going into Gaza again, not to go against the will of the world, not to go against the will of the Israeli people, and especially not in light of the fatigue of the army. And there is an alternative to maintain our superiority in the eyes of the Arab world. Because right now, Hamas, their 24 battalions are dismantled. The leadership is dead. The infrastructure of missiles is also almost completely wiped out. All they have is their tunnels, which means that they're strong on defense, but they're very weak on offense. So it would be very simple for Israel to adopt a strategy that says we are no longer going to allow Hamas to build up their weapons, which, by the way, was not the position before October 7th. Before October 7th, the position of the Israeli government is, if we see they're about to attack us, we're going to attack them first. It was not, if we see that they're increasing their supply of weapons, we're going to attack them. That's what should be happening. So, in that sense, it's not a strategic risk to end the war with Hamas. We could end the war with Hamas and not have to worry about it, within reasonable probabilities, not have to worry about it happening again if we adopt this stance that we're not going to allow them to gain any weapons. The problem for Israel, as I said before, it's the narrative risk. What will the Arab world say about it? So, if the problem is not the strategy but the story, let's change the story. How do you change the story? Well, what happens if we locate the story of Hamas inside a larger story? For example, what happens if, by ending the war with Hamas, getting the hostages back, we are able to achieve normalization with Saudi Arabia, for example, which is absolutely on the table. Now, normalization of Saudi Arabia means that you've built a regional architecture around Iran that isolates Iran. That's victory over Iran. What we have right now is not total victory over Iran. We have something partial. But what if we have a narrative that we achieve normalization with Saudi Arabia and then we have victory over Iran? That's victory. And everyone understands, in a war, you may lose a battle, but you've won the war. So if we locate the problem, and the problem is the story and not the strategy, then we just have to build a bigger story to save us from that dispute, from that defeat. Okay, so that's his analysis. So then Daniel Gordis asked this question, and as you followed our discussions, he asked this question in different ways of many of the people he speaks to. Daniel Gordis says as follows: we're all in a state of exhaustion. In Israel, we're exhausted. Outside Israel, people who love Israel are exhausted. They're afraid. We're afraid. They're afraid for us. They're afraid of what this is doing to them in their communities. You notice when there's a growing animosity towards Israel, there is a rise in anti-Semitic acts outside of Israel. We're afraid about the fiber of this community. People at their wits' end, and they fear we're going in a very dark period. And they don't see how we're getting out of it. So he says, Micah Goodman, what gives you hope that this is going to be a country where your children, when they are your age, are going to want to live here? Okay. We've heard this question from Gordis before, and we've heard this answer before, but listen to Goodman's version of it. Listen to this. All the despair happens when you look up. You see the systems above us, the leadership, their process of decision-making. And it's not only the government. You feel like these people are they're divisive, they promote polarization, they're lazy, maybe a little bit corrupt, and there's a deficit of trust towards them. That's for sure true. That's where the pessimism comes from. But notice, every time you're optimistic, and think about all the times that you and I have spoken when we are optimistic about Israel, it's not when you look up, it's when you look down. You look at the grassroots Israel, you look at the Miluim at their souls. You look at the volunteers. You look at the spirit of the people from the bottom, which is filled with altruism. Remember, just Friday that we discussed one example of this, and so many examples of this we've discussed over the months, and we will continue to do. And so Goodman says, I have a question for you. Here's a question for you and me. If you look up, you get pessimistic. If you look down, you say, wow, there's great energy here. There's unity, there's initiative. This is the Israel that's not lazy. This is the Israel that saved Israel on October 7th. So here's the question. If you have to choose a country, one country is dysfunctional on the top, but the spirit is alive on the bottom. In another country, everything is functioning from the top. Everything is almost perfect on the top, but corrupt and lazy and egocentric and materialistic on the bottom. Which country would you choose? Obviously, I think, we would choose the country that's healthier on the bottom. And Goodman says, this is what Israel has today. We have these young Israelis with all of these grassroots initiatives that we have discussed and so many more. I think that his sense of young Israelis today, and I certainly saw this when I was in Israel, speaking to young people who were in the army, who had been in the army, I think their sense was on October 7th, Israel was not there to save Israelis, so Israelis saved Israel. And these Israelis say, our job is not done. Israel is too important. And that spirit is very much alive in Israel today. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.